Empowered Yoga Teachers. It is Monday and I am here with another episode for you of Yin is Your Friend. I hope you're doing well. I missed seeing you last week, but here I am. So today we are doing half butterfly for Yin Yoga. And you can do this one on a chair, pretty much every option. Actually, let's just start. Let me start seated on the bolster, and I can show you how that you could do this in a chair. So you would just have them bring the foot in or have it just a little bit open with it sitting on the floor. If I had my chair out, I would show you. So half butterfly though, let's just start on the floor. And if you know me, you know that I like to sit on a blanket. It just feels better. So I'm sitting up on a blanket. This is going to look like Janu Sirsasana, head to knee pose for regular yoga. So starting just having students sit down and then lean back, rock side to side, and then you can kind of be looking around the room and checking in with, you know, if it looks like people are struggling to sit here, because that usually means tight hamstrings or something like that, then you could have them sit up a little higher. You could fold the blanket in half again, which is actually pretty nice. And then start with feet about hip distance apart, and then we'll just kind of see what happens there. So you bend one knee, foot on the floor, and then start to let the knee come out to the side, sole of the foot going somewhere on the inner thigh. And right away you may have this start to happen. So if the leg is floating and it's painful, you can prop it with a block or a bolster. And sometimes students just, their femur is so naturally internally rotated that doing this at all, just, it's like they bump up against something and it might not be the best option for them, but just for the sake of right now, you could just prop that. You could even put an extra blanket there. So we're targeting the hips and spine. How much you're targeting the hips versus the spine or both really depends on the skeletal structure of the student. And this leg, it might not feel good. There might be a tug behind the knee. So you could also prop it there. So then from there, we're lengthening the spine first, checking in with students to see if anybody has anything that would prevent them from rounding in the back. And if they do, they're just not going to round the back. They can come forward just a little and keep the spine really long, or just be here and lean forward a little. But you're looking for neutral spine if there's a contraindication toward rounding the back, the low back. And that usually is because of some sort of disc issue, but the students should know if they've been told not to have flexion in the low back or rounding the low back. And then otherwise, we're kind of doing what we do in the other postures. We just kind of start to round forward, and you may be here. You may be a little further. If you have students who can go all the way down flat, then to encourage them to experience something different, you can see if they will go with having a bolster here or even here and getting them to do this. And so you can see from the side when I do that, switch legs, that encourages some rounding in the back and in the spine. And that just gives a little bit different sensation. When you are actively keeping the back long like that and you're using the back muscles, you're actually not getting a stretch in those because they're contracting, and you can't really do both at the same time. So any way that you can set them up where they can get that letting go of the holding on to that tension. Now again, if rounding is contraindicated, then we don't do that. We would get at that tissue in a different way. So many other things you can do here. So sometimes students, like bending this knee, it just creates strain behind the knee. And hang in here with me today because there are lots of things to do here. If you haven't picked up Bernie Clark's latest edition of the Complete Guide to Yin Yoga, I highly recommend. A lot of these options are in there. So you can fold up a strap, wedge it behind the knee, and a lot of times if there's any strain there, that will relieve it. Another thing that you could do is this other leg could be bent, and you can lean over and round over that leg, especially if IT band or hamstring is complaining or tight. And then another thing that I really love about this option in Yin Yoga is that sometimes we don't stick strictly to this very active and aligned idea of Janu Sirsasana. Sometimes it feels better for students to abduct a little bit, both legs, and then you get a little bit more in the groin area, which gets us a little bit more into the liver and kidney meridian lines, and then you can do the same thing. And sometimes students like this quite wide. It just really depends on their skeletal structure. If you've done training with me, you know that I talk about this a lot. Other options you can do here. So sometimes I have students ask me, they feel like they're doing too much in a Yin Yoga class. And I agree. I think that you can get a lot of mileage out of 4 or 5 postures, honestly, if you're doing the different variations of them. So let's talk about this one. You can do the forward. Let's say we're doing this abducted version. You can do the rounding forward. You can do a twist. You can do the twist in both directions on both legs, both sides if you wanted. You can turn toward that leg and lean forward. So the further the straight leg is abducted, the more of a twist it is, and then you can round. Sometimes that doesn't feel good for people, so you just have them do the twist part. You could have this knee slightly bent with support under it. So you've got here, you could even go here. Sometimes my students, we like to call this half dragonfly because we are really having the legs abducted here. And another thing you can do is a side lean on both sides here. So if you think about if you were going to put this in a class and you're going to do maybe the rounding to the middle first for a couple of minutes, and then you could come up and maybe do a twist for maybe like 5 rounds of breath, and then the folding forward with the twist, and you would do, I would say maybe a minute there. I'm just giving you options. And then maybe do the twist on the other side for about 5 to 10 rounds of breath. And you're just sort of guiding that and letting them do that on their own in terms of counting the breath, but you're keeping a general eye on it. And then you could do all of that on the other side. So that gives you a lot of things to do. So we're mainly stimulating your urinary bladder when we're doing this folding forward. Anything they're feeling along the whole back body, legs, the bottom, the spine, the neck, it's all urinary bladder. If you do the side leaning, or you give them an option where they really feel it on the outside of the hips, then that is gallbladder meridian. And then anything that you're doing that gives the inner thighs, the knees a stretch or feeling there is liver and or kidney meridian. And let's see, what other options? Sometimes I have students who would prefer, especially if you look at my feet, you can see that my legs are my femurs are naturally externally rotated. I'm not doing that, that's just where they go. They're not here, I have to internally rotate to make that happen from how my femur sits in the joint. So sometimes if you have them and they're sitting like, and their feet are maybe like straight up or even in a little, that's natural internal rotation. So if you ask them to go and all the way here, they're probably going to bump up against something in their pelvic area that won't allow them to do that, and it simply may just not feel good. So if they're already internally rotated some, you can actually give them kind of like a half frog version if it feels okay on the knee, and then they can still get this and this, the turning and this, but it's not causing that constant tugging and bumping up and compression there. So this is totally fine. This is also considered a version of saddle or half saddle. So be creative, help your students be curious about their bodies and what options might be best for them. So things to remember: strain behind the knees, you can support it somehow. Knee floating or creating tension or too much sensation in the hip where it feels like pain, you can support with blocks. You can put a wedge behind the knee to help create space in that joint so that there's more room there, and it can sometimes alleviate that pain. And elevating the hips. So elevating hips above knees is really helpful, especially for sciatica where it's through the piriformis. And let's see, sitting up on the bolster. And you could also do a version of this at the wall even. So let's do that one and then we'll wrap this one up. Legs up the window. So here, oops, and then just here. So especially good for people who don't need to round in the spine or really tight hamstrings. And if this is too tight, they could bend the knee or scoot the bottom away from the wall a bit. I think those are all the options I have for you today for half butterfly. Thank you for tuning in. For Yin is your friend. If you're watching this on my channel on YouTube, feel free to like it and subscribe to the channel so you get all the Yin Yoga goodness. And if you're watching this on Instagram or Facebook, hey, drop me a comment, give me a shout. I'd love to hear from you. Talk soon.